Okay, welcome back for some extra. We'll maybe do a little shorter than usual today, if you don't mind, because we do have to hit the road in a second. Where do we start? Obviously, tariffs.
Yeah. Tariffs.
Mark, I wonder if you had if you had take a somewhat more positive view of what's going on there than perhaps we do.
Well, positive in a way, maybe neutral in a way too. Just getting the news reported and kind of getting the basic facts out there. Uh, Let the chips fall where they may. Sometimes I follow that path. Um, Tariffs have always been characterized as a contentious kind of weaponized form of taxation. I remember going to the International Monetary Fund in 2011 and covering the spring World Bank IMF meeting. And I asked the panel a number of tariff related questions. And this guy got me off to the side. He worked for the Wall Street Journal. And he said, tariff is a dirty word around here. You might not want to throw that around too much. And he was being serious. And it's kind of strange that they incite so much controversy. Um, it's really just another form of taxation. I mean, Gus Stelzer, a noted author on The Nightmare of Camelot, the free trade Trojan horse, who I knew before he passed away, he talked a lot about how all taxes are tariffs in essence. The income tax is an income tariff, a property tax is a property tariff, and they all have a tendency to end up downstream in the end products prices, the prices of end products to the end consumer. So it's a question of what kind of tariff do you want, is what I've understood. And so one of the things that's happening is the other countries are, when the US institutes a tariff of whatever amount, they won't talk about the fact that for a long time they've been instituting typically even higher tariffs against the US. So it's a sin for the US to institute a tariff of, let's just say, 30%. But if another nation has a tariff that's twice that, somehow that's forgivable or it can be overlooked. It's only a bad idea if the US does it. That's the impression that you get across the board.
You disagree?
And
Keep going. Yeah,
well, let me continue that when you reorient the economy and you make the U.S. more friendly for manufacturing. Now, you guys talked about automation, but nevertheless, it does create value. It does create some jobs. The jobs tend to be higher paying. And the way that local economies work in the U.S. is, let's say you're a municipality within a county. If you have a couple large factories there, the way the property taxes work to fund the schools, to fund the roads, to fund the police, the fire departments, even to pay for 9/11 emergency, to cover publicly funded senior citizens for or senior centers for the elderly. The way that happens is those larger companies pay the lion's share of the property taxes. And whenever there's big industrial or manufacturing concerns in that municipality or that jurisdiction, then commensurately the property taxes of the residences tend to be much lower. It was that way where I grew up in Southwest Michigan. There was a large nuclear plant, the Cook nuclear plant along Lake Michigan, and everybody's property taxes were significantly lower in that township within the county than a neighboring township that would not have a large tax-paying entity like that power plant. So as you put as you reindustrialize America, those new industries will take up a lot of the property tax slack, reduce the residential property taxes, which puts more money in their pockets without a basic income being needed necessarily. And so there's a lot that goes on at the local level that's not seen or discussed. And I realize there's downsides to it too, but I try and look at it in the aggregate and realize there's pros and cons. That's basically where I'm coming from.
Well, look, first of all, if it's a tax, if tariffs are a tax, by executive fiat, Trump does not have the right to levy a tax. It should be done by Congress, something like this. And as I pointed out in the news program, they use a cheap excuse or a hook like fentanyl in order to do wide sweeping global reform that's going to affect what's already a very delicate global economy, is not to mention the U.S. economy. That's the first thing. The second thing is that This idea that economics is a zero-sum game, which is something that's very popular in Trump world. That if anybody benefits, it's to our detriment. Okay, this is not. There's how trade deals are struck. How any deals are struck is that both sides have to win, get something. There has to be a win-win. Okay, and trade is not like for like. Okay, the reason Canada is an example, next door neighbor, Canada puts heavy subsidies on, heavy tariffs on incoming U.S. dairy products, as an example. One of many examples, by the way, as well as agricultural products, because Canada can't afford to subsidize their dairy industry to the tune that the United States do, as well as their agricultural industry, as well as many, many other industries that are just swimming in federal subsidies. And how can the United States afford to subsidize all of these industries that make it impossible for any other country, small countries, to compete in a, quote, fair and free market? It's because they're allowed to overprint money, because they're allowed to use deficit spending, because the United States has the world reserve currency and they can run up a $36 trillion deficit because they have the global world reserve currency, because they've managed to gamify the global financial system and they don't ever have to pay back their debts. And what Trump is trying to do here is trying to force lower interest rates, devalue the dollar so he can refinance $9 trillion of debt. But any gains, a couple $100 billion that he's going to gain from this little caper, is going to be wiped out by inflation. This is just like, there's many different ways to approach this problem, but this seems to be a lot of theater that's going to end up with a net of nothing, and a whole shift in relationships globally that's going to not be to the advantage of the United States. And I don't even want to get into the petrochemical business between Canada and the United States, because that's another misnomer. Americans are so high on some of this rhetoric right now. Oh, Canada's ripping us off. Mexico's ripping us off. Everyone's ripping us off. We've got to stop this. It's the golden age of America. We've had it. You know, it's ridiculous. None of this is grounded in any serious analysis and a serious take on reality. This is all theater. And you know who's going to get rich off this? Not the working class, not the middle class. They're going to get hammered with cost of living and inflation. Okay, they're going to get hammered. Whatever tax breaks Trump throws their way, they're going to pay. They're going to pay over the odds in inflation. That's what happened during COVID. Everyone cashed in their stimulus checks. Cashed in. I got my Trump check, the first one from Trump. It was like $1,200 or something. I'll go and cash that. You paid for that. That $1,200 free money stimulus check you got from Trump and Biden, got another one from Biden. You probably ended up paying at least $5,000 out of your pocket in inflation and the rise of the cost of living, because the Fed put $9 trillion on the balance sheet.
Oh, but that was Russia's fault.
Yeah, it's not Russia's fault. So like this whole thing, nobody wants to own the COVID debacle. Trump and Biden both equally destroyed the U.S. economy, basically took a hammer to the middle class through the stealth tax of inflation. And here they go again. All the Wall Street guys are making a shed load of money
Yes.
by the collapse of the S&P 500. The hedge funds are just loving this. But we can't put up a $100 million position and make out like bandits, because we're just like regular people. We're not involved in the get rich aspect of this economic reset. But I'll bet you Howard Lutnick and his Cantor Fitzgerald mob and Scott Bassett and all these people, they're going to do very well out of this, especially if they had advanced knowledge about this thing that was coming down the pipeline this week. Yeah, they're doing pretty good. I can guarantee that.
Well, it wasn't as if it was very secret. I mean, Trump's been making a lot of overtures like this for quite a while. What happened April 2nd was just sort of a culmination of all the previous tariff announcements. And he was really making it quite clear that he is trying to kind of steer the ship of state economically a little different. So it's not like it was some, nefarious or mysterious secret that just popped up out of nowhere. I would also mention too that the way you're describing inflation is sort of along the lines of the Austrian school view of inflation.
No, I don't think it is. I mean,
Well, it's based on the idea that if you increase the money supply at all, that automatically you're robbing the currency of its
No,
purchasing power and things like this.
no. I got to push back on that, Marcus. That's not what Patrick's saying, because Patrick is talking about
Well, what it
expanding
sounded
the
like.
money. No, he's talking about expanding the money supply at a rate which is absolutely vastly beyond any semblance of a growth in the real economy, and that absolutely is inflation.
Well, I don't think that that's true, though. The U.S. economy, the GDP, the output is far and away above what incomes are and what the money supply is. There's
No,
plenty
no,
of
no, no,
room.
no, 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 no. I can't. No, absolutely not, Mark. GDP is a measure of the amount of money that's in the economy. It's not a measure of productivity. It's not a measure of production. It's a fake measurement, and you can't use GDP as a measure if you're talking these things. You absolutely can't.
Relative parity purchasing power
Right.
is probably a
Well,
better metric. Yeah, what do you get
well,
for your money?
industrial.
Because the only reason that Britain, the EU, and the US has had any increase in GDP in the last 40 years is because of inflation. It's a nonsense.
And what did
it's a
Britain put?
nonsense
2
figure.
trillion on the COVID?
Right.
What did you put here? 2 trillion?
Something like 2 trillion.
Two
yeah.
trillion. Now, that's a huge amount of money for
for
Britain.
our economy. Yeah.
And we paid for it. America really paid for it, though. We saw a noticeable jump in prices of food and all sorts of other basic items. I mean, through the roof. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's because you're going to pay for it. You can't just print money out of thin air to that degree in that short space of time, and there's not going to be a huge tremor as a result in the economy. So who pays for that? Well, the upper class, the Wall Street class, it doesn't hurt them at all. They don't even feel it, but we feel it. People who it's unbelievable that Trump and Biden too, but especially Trump got away with this scot-free COVID. I mean, it's just. We have to be honest about this stuff. Forget about, I don't really care what party I'm registered with anymore. The whole thing is just a scam. That Elon Musk is a champion of the working class. He's the richest man in the world. How could he be a champion of the working class?
He could be a champion of the working class by giving the working class all his money, but he's not likely to do that, is he?
But I don't mind that he's rich. I mean, someone's got to be the richest guy in the world, but don't carry on like you're the working class hero. This stuff is just getting out of hand.
Yeah, that's sort of a given. But the thing is, if you wouldn't have put that stimulus in the economy in the U.S. during COVID, you would have had a much more recessionary situation.
No, don't shut the damn thing down in the first place.
There was option.
Well,
there was an
that's
option.
a given.
So you can't.
Of course.
That's not a valid excuse because they shouldn't have done it to begin with, and they should have paid the price. They should have all been thrown out. There should have been pitchforks. That's the problem. They destroyed the economy, and they will destroy the government and the country as a result of that. That is going to be the original sin of the 21st century. And nobody is man enough to own it. To own it. Trump's got a pair of balls the size of, I don't know, get the microscope out. Get the electron microscope out. You have a better, easier time finding the coronavirus spike protein than you will Trump's balls.
Hold on here. That's why I'm reporting on the WHA, the World Health Assembly number 78. Here we go again. We got to be aware. We've got to get involved. And yes, ultimately, that lockdown and all that should never have happened. But nevertheless, the economic hurt was there, and people had to have enough money to make their payments, to pay their car payments, to pay their mortgages. Otherwise, you'd have more foreclosures on mortgages. I'd rather have a slightly inflated currency than a repossessed house, and that could have easily happened to many, many people.
That's like saying, oh, we really should have the airbags fixed on the car before we drive it off the cliff. It's just it's not even a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah.
They've not. No one's ever paid the political price for this. We paid. And the companies that got their PPE loans that they didn't have to pay back. And the government, all the government workers that sat at home getting their gold plate pensions padded, getting paid full and furloughed and all the rest of it, and didn't have to do anything. Like they didn't go out and they didn't do anything.
I don't think you're giving it a complete look. I mean, when you look at mom and pop businesses around that time, and yes, the COVID thing shouldn't have happened. That this is about WHO, it's about the CDC, it's about Kennedy getting serious about his job. Granted, we got to watch out for this next pandemic treaty. We can't let it happen again. But you got, like, just around here, you got all sorts of local coffee shops, mom and pop businesses. They welcomed that fluidity, that extra purchasing power, so they didn't go under. You know, some people working for years.
Mark, of course they did. Of course they did. But they should never have been put in that. And that's the only point there is here. They should never have been put in that position.
It was national suicide. National suicide.
We know that.
It was insanity. And instead of accepting that check, in my opinion,
burn it.
They should have burned the check, and they should have, all of them, been camped outside the White House until the policy was lifted.
Yep.
The economy was destroyed by policy. It was destroyed by our politicians.
And it showed you could buy people off with a little bit of money that ended up being worth way less than the time the check was cut. Okay? That was the Brazilization of the United States.
And Britain.
The banana republicization of the U.S., of Britain, of Europe, of all the Western economies.
Hold on. The thing is, though, is that most people are getting their information from the legacy media. They don't understand what we understand. To them, it's a survival thing. Granted, there would be an ideal where you would protest this kind of sloughing people off and saying, just take your money and be quiet. I get where you're coming from, but most people don't have that level of awareness. And it was literally, they don't want to close their business doors, and many still had to. Many still.
Yeah, they paid people not to work. They paid businesses not to trade. I mean, this is not going to end well. This is like the worst thing you could do. The government's responsibility is to protect the economy and from disaster, and instead they intentionally created a disaster that our kids are going to pay for. Our kids are going to pay for this.
One of the reasons you have tariffs is protection against dumping. There are protectionist reasons for tariffs, besides raising revenue, besides trying to establish a more labor-friendly environment to rebuild or build new factories. So tariffs
who's
have
dumping?
Part of that.
Who's dumping in America? No one's dumping. No one's dumping in America. Trade levels and price points have been normalized over 30 years of globalization. And Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, sitting there banging on the White House lawn, talking about this emergency that's been going since 1997. I mean, this is just bonkers, these people.
Well, I think what they're doing there is they're just using the word emergency to call attention to the fact that the trade deficit for a long time.
No. They're using the word emergency to have an executive order, to justify an executive order that should go through Congress. Okay, I'm a constitutionalist, so I don't care about the president's executive power. To me, this is the worst possible thing you could do, is to have a president come in, because guess what's going to happen? The next president that comes in, who's going to be a Democrat probably, if Trump keeps it up at this rate, the next president will be a Democrat. There'll be some clown like that, Gavin Newsom, and he's going to abuse the executive order way worse than Trump is right now. This is what's happened. It's been a ratcheting up of executive orders ever since probably the Clinton administration, one after another, and Trump taking it to another level of obscene absurdity, and then the next Democrat is going to be worse.
I mean, it's tantamount to the divine right of kings, as far as I can see.
It is. This is a dictatorship. This is a president bypassing Congress. He's bombing countries, doesn't consult Congress, overhaul U.S. trade policy globally, no discussion with Congress, nothing. And I blame the Democrats as well as the Republicans for that, both of them. But this is bad for the country. I'm telling you, this is not. Honestly, I don't think this is going to end well. The other reason I can tell this is not going to end well, because Trump keeps dangling carrots like Elon, dangling things like Elon's dangling Mars in front of you, saying, "Oh, we're going to go to Mars. Isn't that great? We're going to put the flag on the thing, or whatever." And then Trump's dangling, "Oh, we're going to abolish the IRS." Well, where's the plan for this? Because if you're going to come in with tariffs, like you say, in an external revenue service, then show us the plan to abolish the IRS. Show us the 10% flat tax rate. I've not seen it. Guess what? It's not coming, because that's not in the plan. This is all theater. It's all theater for short-term headlines and whatever he and his gang of billionaires are going to. So the wealth gap during COVID, unprecedented wealth gap, made more super billionaires than ever. The rich got richer on a scale and in a short space of time like never before. That's exactly what's going to happen now with this current new reset. It's going to create a huge gap in wealth, and the poor are going to get poorer. The middle class is going to get more wiped out, and the rich are going to get fabulously richer. I'm telling you right now, Mark. That's where it's coming.
You're gonna. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I really think that the making such sweeping statements at this point, there's a lot of room for error there, because when you reestablish U.S. manufacturing, when you lower the residential property taxes because industrial concerns will take up more of that slack, when this happens, I think there's a lot of things where you kind of have to wait and see how it works out.
What industry? When is it going to arrive?
Any industry.
When is it coming?
If you put a car manufacturer in, let's say, a community in Tennessee, that manufacturer will take up much of the property tax to pay for local services.
Right, but hold on a second, Mark. Let me ask you this then, right? Because
the way it works.
You have spent a lot of time in Michigan. That's the center of car manufacturing in the United States.
Was.
Yeah. But whatever's left of it, it's there. And none of those companies have supply chains that allow them to manufacture what they need to build a car in the United States.
Of course.
So the parts that they buy, some of them. So no, hold on. Let me finish this point, let's take an example. Something which is manufactured, at least to some degree, in Canada, gets shipped to Mexico for finishing, and then it gets shipped to the United States for putting into a U.S. car. The United States has no machine tooling. It has no trained personnel. It has no engineers. It is going to take decades to replace that manufacturing capability, even if you have the gumption from the federal government to support that kind of replacement of supply chains. It is going to take decades. He has dumped this situation on everybody overnight. And by overnight, I mean, okay, people saw it coming over the last several weeks. Big deal. That is overnight in industrial terms or any manufacturing terms. Nobody is going to be prepared for this. Nobody is going to be able to deal with this. And nobody is going to benefit for this ever, because they can't replace these supply chains in the next 10 presidential terms, right? So anyway, let Mark respond to that first.
Well, first of all, we're going to keep getting foreign parts. Just because you have some tariffs doesn't mean the foreign parts will stop coming in. Second of all,
hold on. You can't let that. No, I can't let that statement pass. Right? You've got to expand on that because you've got to expand on that because that's not going to stop the manufacturing of a car, but it raises the price. And so, where's the benefit to the U.S. consumer whenever the price is raised? Because all the parts that are going into that car now have a tariff attached to them.
Well, the plan, at least the assumption is that incomes will go up as well. Taxes will be kind of reoriented the way I described. Also, going through Indiana and parts of Michigan, there actually kind of is something of a renaissance of machine tooling. Even in my corner in Michigan, the southwest corner, there are a number of plants that weren't there before. I think that what we're seeing here is an evolutionary thing. And yeah, it will take time, but I guess the idea or the thinking is it has to start somewhere. And it may be a bumpy ride in some areas. I'm not saying it's altogether good, but I'm saying that there could be other policies. Maybe there'll be a cutting back on some of the subsidies that Patrick referred to. There might be other changes that we don't see coming yet. Hopefully monetary changes where we wouldn't have a debt-based money system. That would change things drastically. I'm going to go with the, kind of keeping my eye on the horizon and see what other changes are coming down the pike. Congress's involvement. Now, that's a very good point. The House Ways and Means Committee has traditionally been a tax writing, tax policy committee. And I'm going to go check out their deliberations a little more closely and see what they have to say about this. Maybe I'll have that for next week. So I'll leave it at that because you guys got limited time. So,
Well, if you've got more to say it.
well, not really. I mean, I think it just deserves further study. Is the Congress going to be completely not involved in this? When Trump makes an EO, does that automatically mean the tariffs are enacted all the way? You got to read the fine print. The executive orders go into the Federal Register. There's something to look at there. Just exactly when do these things actually get inaugurated? When do the tariffs actually start getting applied and not just talked about? So, I'm going to look at some of those details. Like I said, I just think there's a lot of unknowns, although there's good points being made today on both sides of the ledger. So I'll leave it at that, literally.
There are a lot of unknowns. Mark's correct. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's going to be some surprises. There's going to be, and this is exactly what happened with globalization. Is American corporations found out it was more cost efficient and they got better profit margins by relocating their manufacturing in other countries. And guess what? If it's too expensive to do business with Uncle Sam, well, I'm just going to relocate my factory outside in Hungary or some other country or China, and then sell to Asia, and sell to Asia, and sell to India, and so forth. It's going to be that's a better business decision for me, and then have a foreign subsidiary, exactly like globalization. The only loser here is going to be the United States. They're going to lose jobs, and they're going to lose exports, because other countries are going to trade with each other. What does the United States manufacture that is so damn good that you can't get it anywhere else, or it's better than China? There might be some products that are marginally better, but when you add the price point on top, well, maybe not. So this is going to also raise the cost of doing business for every country in the world doing business with the United States. Just like Brexit raised the cost of business for Britain and all of its trading partners, because instead of having a common market, they had to do individual, a whole lattice spider web of individual bilateral deals with everybody, and it turned out to be an administrative nightmare. And I know a lot of companies that just threw their hands up and gave up at that point, and they moved on into something else. So, I mean, Brexit was a disaster for small to medium-sized businesses, especially SMEs. But also there's other companies that have just basically left. And it's too expensive to do business.
I could go on, but I don't want to hold you guys up. You got an important program.
Come on. We're okay. Let's come on.
Well, I mean, some people, economists, writers over the years have talked about autarky, the concept of autarky, where a nation's main responsibility is to build stuff for its own population and only export its surpluses. So one could say, yeah, maybe the US doesn't have a lot of great products that other countries would want, but somebody that believes in, a very strong degree of economic self-sufficiency would say the main thing is to produce good products for your own home population, export your surpluses, and have enough purchasing power and prosperity within the economy so people can afford the very products that are made. Like Henry Ford paid his workers enough so they could buy the Model T that they were making. That kind of philosophy. So there's a philosophical element to this. What is the purpose of an economy? Is it to export all over the world and sell people all over the world your products, or is it mainly to sell to your home population? And you'd even look at the birth rate. Are we having enough people born in the U.S. On U.S. soil? You have to have enough young workers to pay into the retirement system to support the retirees. There's a whole infrastructure there that has to be paid attention to, on a national level. So in a way, it's a philosophical thing. What's the purpose of an economy? And I definitely have to leave it at that. So,
well, let me just ask you one question then. Does that not risk the United States being equivalent to Soviet Russia, for example, where there's only certain people can access a foreign made car. Otherwise, you've got to get on the list for the car that's come out of Detroit, because Detroit can only manufacture X number of cars a year, because actually they're not able to effectively trade with other countries. It seems like it just feels like the wrong direction. And
he's teeing it up for the next communist government, basically. Mm-hmm. So Trump must be working for AOC.
You got to remember that the current system we have was a result of the globalists. The globalists made China into a manufacturing rim. That was done through Nixon and through the Rockefellers.
But globalists, look, Mark, globalism and globalization are two different things. They're not the same thing. Globalism is global government, global governance. Globalization is literally global free trade. They're two different things.
But they involve many of the same interests, many of the same.
But you have to separate. I don't know. Listen, we've had globalized trade since the beginning of the Silk Road. Europe was built on the European Renaissance was built off of Asia, trade with Asia. Okay, the Roman Empire was globalization, albeit on a smaller geographical scale. So it's not like a new concept that just came online in like 1990. We've had a globe. The British Empire was the godfather of globalization. It's just that the crown was the main beneficiary.
Not so much the godfather. Actually, you were right the first time. That the Silk Road, because that was the Venetian Empire at the time. That's right. And they set off
the Doge.
The Doge, exactly. They sent Marco Polo off, and they were playing the same. By the way, that was the foundation of the Lombard banking system. That was all Lombardy. It was, and so you go to the city of London, and you've got Lombard Street, and all these references back to Florence and to Venice, right? And they were playing the same kind of gags, financial gags. Then trading in silver one day, not accepting gold. The next day, they'd swap the other way, and then they'd game the exchange rate between silver and gold, and so they were making profit not only on the trades but also on the actual currency exchange. It was all the same kind of monetary, financial, banker.
That's how it all started.
How it all started, absolutely.
But a globalist government needs a globalized economy. It goes hand in hand. And one last thing I'll mention is that when China was made into this powerhouse, their culture really wasn't like that. They had this sort of capitalist subcurrent installed with the Communist Party still in charge, and they called that kind of economic liberalization. They thought it would reduce the brutal policies of Communist China. Maybe it did to a degree, but these huge trade deficits that the U.S. has suffered under China while China had surpluses is partially what enabled China to leverage that relationship and build their military. And so that's sort of a backdoor channel for foreign aid. I think Trump is right in the sense that the trade deficits are uncomfortably high and at least should be drastically reduced. Any other country would want the same thing. And so it's not wrong for the U.S. to want to cut those trade deficits. It's in the national interest of any country to try and do that as much as reasonably possible. So.
Listen, manufacturing left the U.S. for a reason, okay? And Walmart became the biggest financial concern in retail America for a reason, because people wanted cheaper products more than they wanted manufacturing jobs at home. And Wall Street wanted to offshore their manufacturing so that they could improve their dividend payouts to shareholders so their stocks would trade higher. There's a great documentary film called The Mayfair Set, and it's the story of Tiny Rowland, John Aspinall, and Mohammed Al-Fayed, and Jim Slater, and how they were the father, and Jimmy Goldsmith. And Jimmy Goldsmith. These were the fathers of globalization from the Anglo-American world, okay? And they decided it was better to asset strip British industry and then basically improve the bottom line of the company and then go public and then make loads of money off the IPO. And they did so well with this model, they exported it to New York. And this was during the 70s and 80s. So this was that transformation This is when the Gordon Gekko revolution coincides with this. It's called the Mayfair Set. It's a 3-part documentary. I think you can watch it for free on YouTube. Now, that's globalization 101, and it started in Britain, which is ironic because that was like the last knockout punch, for Main Street and the working class and the manufacturing sector.
I don't think the average person had much choice in whether to reduce manufacturing or just get cheaper products. I don't think the average person really knew what was going on with regards to that. And I think there's going to be efforts. Trump has indicated some things. Granted, it takes a while to see if it's going to happen, to reduce the cost of manufacturing things here in the U.S. I think we're going to see those costs go down. How much and how quickly is the only question.
How is he going to? How are you going to reduce the cost of manufacturing? Have robots have robots do the job, right?
Well, you could reduce income taxes. You could reduce property taxes, things like that.
But
it's not just
America. I mean, again, where's the plan? We're all sitting here debating like how he's going to do this, and Trump should have laid out the whole plan before he went with the hatchet to do the great tariff reset. I mean, this is like
that's why I want to look.
Yeah.
That's why I want to look at the House Ways and Means Committee and and do some investigation there. There should be some sort of
he should have laid it out, Mark. He should have laid it out. Where's there's no communication. This is a slapdash flying by the seat of your pants. Bunch of cowboys. Honestly,
it falls to us.
Their foreign policy is the same. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They got this guy with tattoos up their arms as defense secretary making foreign policy on signal chats.
I think they know exactly what they're doing.
This is
I think they know exactly what they're doing.
If anything, I'm saying Trump, far than being the golden age of America, I believe Trump has been put in by the establishment. They knew he was going to make a balls up of it. And this is decoupling America as a world superpower and downgrading the United States. Trump is presiding over the collapse of the United States as a global hegemon. And he's there to make people feel good about the collapse. That's what I think. I'm beginning to be very suspicious now about, I've given him he's already ballsed up everything in 90 days. It's like he can't do any worse than this. He's going to get impeached or he's going to be thrown Napoleon into a prison in Corsica or something.
Should the U.S. be a global hegemon? See, that's the question. Should we be that Roman Empire, or maybe we should look for another way?
For sure, Mark. I'm all for that discussion, but that's not the discussion we're being fed. That's the problem. You're right, but that's not what's being sold to us. This is the problem that I have is that I think they're being completely dishonest, disingenuous, and probably don't know what the hell they're doing, to be quite frank.
I think economically, I think what Mike said, I don't think it's ignorance or incompetence. I think they do know what they're doing. And, you can read that different ways. Again, I think we need to check some sources of Congress and see if they're involved, if there's a plan. Are they going to cut domestic manufacturing costs? What the politicians don't do, it falls on us as journalists to figure out. So there you go.
Right. Well, we do have to leave it there.
I'll say one more thing, and this is a jump-off point for a future discussion. I think if I was all of these countries in Europe, India, China, Russia, start decoupling from the United States and from Europe.
They already are.
Decouple. Get out of the dollar. Get away from Europe. Get away from America. Get away from they're toxic. They're going down. The Western Empire is burning right now. Get off before it goes to the bottom of the ocean, because you'll get sucked in the undertow.
And if you happen to live in one of the countries that's in the Western Empire, well, oh dear.
Well, you have to deal with it. There'll be winners and losers, but if you're trading with the West, I just get away from them. Run a mile.
But we got to leave it there for today. Mark, thank you very much. Patrick, thanks to
you guys have a good one tomorrow.
The comments in the chat box, everybody was enjoying that conversation a lot. So hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon. Thank you, everybody.
Cool.
And enjoy the live stream tomorrow, and we'll have fun in Cheltenham. We'll see you on Monday, as usual, 1 p.m. Bye-bye.
Have a good program, guys.